Expecting every scientist to be NT. Scientific thought based on the cooperation of experiment and theory is a combination of thinking and sensation. Wolfgang Pauli, undated. Many scientists are probably sensates. They tend to be fascinated with facts and with discovering and observing how things work. Mary Ann Mattoon, 1985. 2. Expecting every thoughtful person to be an N-type. I try to discover the creative geniuses among the sensation types because in general, people hold that creative imagination is more apt to be found in people who perceive the world by intuition. I think studies of the immortals, that is, the great geniuses, may not bear out that general belief. Horace Gray, 1949. Intelligence is not a function but a modality. The word tells us no more than how a function is working, not what is functioning. C.G. Jung, 1921. 3. Expecting every creative artist to be an N-type. Jung attaches great importance to the creative activity of fantasy, which he even puts in a category of its own, because in his opinion it cannot be subordinated to any of the four basic functions, but partakes of them all. He rejects the usual notion that artistic inspiration is limited to the intuitive type. Jolandi Jacobi, 1942. 4. Thinking that physical characteristics are relevant to Jungian typology. Unlike Freud, who had the assumption of the sovereignty of the physical constitution, trying to turn everything back in theory into instinctual processes conditioned by the body, I start with the assumption of the sovereignty of the psyche. C.G. Jung, 1921. Jung's typology omits any reference to bodily characteristics and is confined to the classification of normal psychic data. This should be noted. E. A. Bennett, 1967. Jung's contribution was a purely psychological classification into the now familiar categories. Joan Evans, 1939. 5. Confusing preference with ability. In Freud's mental makeup, sensation was a far more active element than intuition. This statement is of course perfectly compatible with the thesis that intuition, though the less active of the two functions in him and though deprecated by him, may have been of a quality superior to most men. But it cannot be repeated too often that the types aim to discriminate between people not in merit, but broadly in their usual ways of mental operations. Horace Gray, 1949. 6. Thinking that specific behavior determines type. Behaviorism is an unsound philosophical prejudice. C.G. Jung, 1948. Since I am not a behaviorist, I take leave to suppose that you are still very far from the real man when you observe only his behavior. I regard behavior as a mere husk that conceals the living substance within. C.G. Jung, 1930. 7. Believing oneself an expert on typology after 2 weeks of study. Determining someone's type is interesting but difficult. C.G. Jung, undated. 8. Believing that great military commanders are usually N-dominant. There are men who, by their makeup, create for themselves a complete picture built upon a single detail. Whatever other good qualities they may have, nature has not marked them for the command of armies. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1827. 9. Not factoring in other elements of personality. Typology pertains to the four functions, their arrangement and orientations. All sorts of other factors that pertain to personality are, in effect, irrelevant to the system. In reality, many typologists suffer from a type of psychological myopia where they want to fit everything into typology because they are not acquainted with anything but typology. The site Admins, 2013.